Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome to the next Tax Stories episode. Today I speak with my friend Janis Zelmenis, who is a Latvian, I would say, local Latvian tax celebrity and very knowledgeable person in taxation, but not only that. He's currently chairman of the management board and equity partner of BDO Latvia, which is a well-known audit firm. He has been with BDO for 14 years and for 5 years with Deloitte and 3 years with PwC. So very experienced, knowledgeable person. He has studied in Moscow and in Central European University, lived for some time in Sweden, speaks many languages, including Swedish, Latvian, English, and so on. Russian, of course. And very important moment is that today Janis has his 50th birthday. So happy birthday, Janis.
Thank you.
Welcome to the podcast. I think it's very good time to look at what has been achieved in your life and how do you feel now in your today's birthday? Have you reached what you wanted to achieve at this point, and have you thought of some new milestones to achieve in the next 50 years?
Well, Janis, thank you for congratulating me on my big figure. That's what all say. It feels somewhat difficult, I would say, to digest the fact that it's not already half of life. It seems like a bit more of a half. But despite the fact that something has been achieved, there's always some targets ahead of me. So one of the things you didn't mention, recently I've been doing business in United Arab Emirates. I spent quite a lot of time down in Dubai. So I have learned another tax perspective. So you got it almost right, all the dates and employers. So I've worked across the number of firms, and since back in 2007, went and established one of my own, jointly with my partner Vita. And it has been, a long and nice sales in that. Yeah, so I've been, in taxes all my professional life. Believe me or not, I did my first, I think it was a tax efficient company. One would call it offshore. But actually, the first companies I did were US LLCs and Irish non-resident companies. This was sort of the early days of my tax planning. How does it feel? It feels, physically it feels pretty okay. There are some stiffness here and there, and looking at you, I finally came to a realization that it's time for golf. So
Really?
Yes, I do. I'm asking some of my guests as a birthday present to present me some hours with coach. So since again I spend considerable time, I would say 20-30% of my time in Dubai. This is the sport for that sort of climate, and so I'm slowing down on my tennis and definitely increasing my number of golf lessons. So you are aware. So I'm catching you up, one way or another.
Right. I can give you some names of the best coaches we have right now. But did you put some milestones in your previous career? What you would like to achieve by becoming 50-year-old?
No, I never thought in terms of my age. Probably I live more through the business cycle and strategy cycle of my firm, and in short, I would say I'm definitely I'm a believer in strategies, but more really into believer in the thinking that goes behind the strategy, and looking at probably 2 or 3 strategies that were drawn up for 3 or 4 years. It's very, and that's a very, I would say, not only interesting, it's very sort of a great learning curve, and you down the sort of in a time perspective, you can retrospectively look what you were thinking back in 2007 and 2011. What were your plans in 2016 to achieve? I find in my career you might not achieve in the same exact manner as was envisaged back then, but certainly because you had the milestone in mind and you were going after a number of milestones. And generally now out of 100%, 90 or 80% are achieved, and achieved through a different, you were thinking, or one might be thinking, or BDO was thinking through the merger, but actually it happened through the growth, or you were thinking of a growth, and actually it happened through the merger with the team. So in a way, this has been helpful to look, retrospect. One of my milestones now is to revive the tax planning according to the new sort of definitions and restrictions that are put in place, because I still believe this is something very challenging, something very intellectually demanding, and it has changed in nature. It probably has changed in nature totally compared to early 90s, but I still believe this can be a service. It can resolve and help people solve a number of problems, not least to understand the tax risks and tax burdens and issues associated with that, be it asset protection or family planning or succession planning, something along these lines. So I'm a great believer that in the next 2-3 years, I will invest more and more my time and resources in bringing or growing bigger the tax practice of BDO Latvia.
Right, and we will talk a lot about tax policies and tax structuring a little bit later. But still, if we go back to yourself, do you feel that you have some sort of middle-age crisis? And if yes, then how what are its expressions?
No, certainly I've not moved to a bicycle or bike. Probably I'm maybe too afraid. I didn't do too much riding on bike in my really young days. So I don't know if have a big limousine is a sign of a crisis. I don't know. The children are over 19 now. My youngest is 19 and the eldest is 23. So.
I mean, do you ask yourself what's the purpose of it all? Is it only about money or?
No, I'm enjoying what I'm doing. I'm making enough money to feel comfortable. There's a good saying: you can't earn all the money of the world. So I have perfectly understood that. I'm a very risk-averse person to a certain extent. I'm in a business, but business of BDO is relatively stable and relatively predictable compared to, I don't know, Bitcoins or cryptos or any other startups, name it. So yes, I am in a business and I take a fair share of risk, but I enjoy of what I'm doing, and my plan is to not to decrease in intensity of life enjoyment. So I might be spending more on my personal little pleasures, but no, I still believe the advantage of consulting profession is the fact that you meet so many colorful, people. You establish relationships that some of them go for more than 20 years, and these are really enriching and relationships that probably nobody else but an advocate, a consultant could have.
You mentioned golf, and I know you're an eager tennis player. You have a guest house? You have family. What is the main runaway? How you switch off from your daily work?
I think I would start from my very extreme switch off, which is hunting. I'm also a hunter. So that's why I have to be careful how to balance the hunting act with the golf playing act. So they are both very time consuming. But I wanted to say, for me, a good sign of full switch off is absence of the mobile phone coverage and absence of internet. This is, I call the ultimate nirvana. And I have enjoyed such breaks for probably 2 or 3 times in my life, which were hunting weeks in Russia and Far East, in Magadan area. So if someone says, let's go for a real sort of holiday, I would say this would be my most extreme switching off. Because usually the concept of my holiday is just changing the setting. So I might be working from office, and equally I can be working from a swimming pool. So I put my AirPods, I have my phone or I have my tablet, and I'm working. So that sort of, this is a mild shift of my working regime. But in order to get away, even just hunting in Latvia is an advantage, since you cannot speak while you hunt. You can read the messages, you can text, but certainly you have to be quiet, and that's an advantage. So and obviously when you see the wild animals, and not only when you shoot at them, but when you just watch them in binoculars, you stop reading the messages. I think that's a good sign. When something is so important that you stop reading your iPhone, that's I would say the Everest, the top of achievement of relaxation.
Right. I just checked in Google. Where is Magadan? It's almost nearby Japan. Why Magadan?
More east. You wouldn't believe it's more east. 1 hour time zone wise, it's more east 1 hour than Japan. So for those who do not know, this is Magadan, is a huge area where both in Russian Empire and in Soviet Union, the Bolsheviks used to expel undesired people. And Magadan actually has a big Latvian impact. The guy who was running Magadan area for more than 10, 15 years was a chap by name as well. I think Jānis, and his surname was Berzins. So there's still a monument for him, and there's still a central street named in his honor.
Right. And I don't know if it's a way to switching off, but I know you have written a book. I even don't know how to translate it into English. Turības svārsts, which is changing wealth.
Pendulum of Wealth. I would say it's a pendulum of, pendulum is something that swings. So it's called Pendulum of Wealth.
Right. Tell me about the book. Why did you write it, and what was the main message you wanted to achieve?
From my perspective, it was totally opposite how it started. It started from participation. 2 days I was giving the witness statements in so-called Lemberg's case, the first instance court, and then the journalists from NRA or Neatkarīga asked for an interview. And since he's my friend and we've studied together in Moscow, he said, I have so much to say that probably the format of simple newspaper interview is a bit too shallow and too bit, excluding lots of good testimonies. So he suggested to write a book, and I said, when I could do that, since the life of a consultant with so many hobbies, and he's somewhat time limited. And then the whole book is my stories, my recollections, spoken on Friday over the Maltese wine on Fridays afternoons, and then text taking was done by my friend Ritums, and then it's lots of careful editing and revisions. And so the book was done probably in less than a year or 8-9 months. From my side, my message was I wanted to basically give my views on privatization. I just think that Latvian society has not yet come to terms with that. In my opinion, stealing in a broad daylight that has huge negative impact on whatever we do thereafter. I believe that the negative consequences and influence of the crimes that were committed within privatization, and so I believe in denationalization, we are still struggling with whatever effects, both in morale and ethics, and so my thought was to give my testimony, to give my views on privatization through a sample case of a state-owned company, the largest and richest state-owned company at that time, Ventspils Nafta, which was dealing in transshipment of oil and oil products. And I just thought it's and the other probably message is that wealth doesn't bring happiness. This is also illustrated by knowing all of these involved beneficiaries, most of whom are unhappy, definitely unhappy, and some of them are in jail.
Right. Actually, it's interesting you mentioned this privatization process in Latvia, because in one of the previous episodes, I was interviewing Bill Broder about privatization process in Russia, and the tax fraud that was made basically as a result of this process. Do you have some particular story to share regarding this Latvian privatization process, maybe that is related to taxation?
Well, if you look very narrowly from a taxation angle, this redistribution of wealth, the emotional word is theft, but more scientific way to describe is redistribution of wealth that was not belonging to anyone particular. So it ended up in the hands of the lucky whoever. But there might have been the managers of these companies. They might have been the power elite of that time. There might be the mix of both. There might be but my point is that quickly acquired wealth, undeserved. Certainly, it's not connected anyhow by the labor investment or any investment. It's more about just taking quick opportunity of the situation and being close to the power. It's untaxed, Janis, simply as that. That wealth was, and that shift of wealth was untaxed. And actually the products or dividends or profits, once it was shifted from so-called state or public hands into private hands, it was not taxed for another 20 years. So it was not taxed by having exempt dividends. It was not taxed by having capital gains exemption. And in a way, if I would be asked to look for an historical parallel, it's very much like Spanish gold or Portuguese gold. It was definitely conquered in occupied colonies. So the privatization was something that just fell on the heads of these lucky few, and obviously most of it went into building palaces, villas, luxury cars, and you name it. And very little of that wealth is still preserved and is still sort of serving any corporate and social societal benefit. So if you look at the outcome of privatization, which was based on a big slogan that the clumsy state property has to be turned private, and obviously the free market and private ownership will make a miracle. I would say it didn't do that. It just probably did 20% of what was expected. And the rest is big trauma. And we are still coping with it. So from my perspective, I was writing this book about the trauma of privatization.
Right. My simple understanding of how this theft basically was happening is that if, for example, I want to sell something to you, I would sell it through an offshore and accumulate the profit somewhere in some offshore. And this offshore would sell as an intermediary to you and accumulate the profits. Is that a sort of, I understand it's very simplified version, but is that a sort of a version how it all happened? And another question that pops into my mind is let's not only relate this to Latvia, but to Eastern Europe and then especially Russia, where also a lot of trading was happening through offshores. What is happening nowadays with this money, and is that money at least returning in economies and creating at least some jobs or doing some good?
Well, you can steer me, but through that, I would say a complex question. In Latvia, in a nutshell, I think you gave the right description. I would just make few technical remarks. So basically, you take a state-owned company, you divide it into two halves, for which you get the government's acceptance. The first half becomes private even before privatization. And in this case, we talk about the bunkering business. That bunkering business has a lot of investors, so-called investors from offshore, where the profits accumulate. And in less than 2 years, so much profits have accumulated that they are ready to participate in official privatization. And then that prime minister who has blessed all that privatization goes into the sailing trip around the world on the money that is given by the company that was privatized by his decision. And the yacht is also owned by the company that was privatized by his decision. So that's how the things were done in Latvia. And probably in the execution, they were somewhat, I would say, in the middle, not top, not sort of top excellent or top sophisticated, and not obviously top ugly. I think the Latvian privatization is blessed that there was much less shooting and fewer killings involved as it was in Russia or in Ukraine or in other sort of post-Soviet territories. So this style, this trend, this is universal. And think that was unprecedented rise of prominence of offshore entities. I don't believe they would ever rise to that prominence soon. Obviously, the something was compromised in a sort of positive beauty of offshore was compromised by this massive abuse of offshore structures in the crimes of privatization. I wouldn't. So therefore, the taste is very bad, and there's a bad taste for offshore for another sort of dozen of reasons. But I would still claim that in very specific, very narrow cases, an offshore can be a legitimate instrument, especially when you don't need a bank account and you probably are dealing with issues of succession and asset protection. But still, I think this trauma and negative shadow is still hanging very intensely over the offshore jurisdictions. And then the big question in theory is, what is offshore? Because, we could probably spend the next 30 minutes discussing that, is it more like an island that is disgusted by the rest of the countries, or this is more towards the idea of having a beneficial tax regime? Then, Latvia and United Arab Emirates are offshores as well.
Right. And nowadays there are so many abbreviations in tax law like CRS, FATCA, ETAD, BEPS, DAC 6, 15% minimum global corporate tax. Will it be enough to change the world now and make companies work onshore, and this little bit maybe goes hand in hand with my previous question of what do you think will happen nowadays with this, let's say, Russian money that was accumulated in offshores?
Specifically on Russian money, I think there are two tendencies. As far as I know, I would not claim to be a mega expert on Russia, but still I probably keep in touch with my friends. And actually, I will go there on Monday to watch the theater Gorbachev, so which is actually directed by a Latvian director, Alvis Hermanis, by I think top Russian actors. So, and Gorbachev to me is a very important figure in my life. So I believe that things that happened in late 80s and very early 90s, or actually late 80s, have shaped me as personality. And so I want to see the director's view on this political figure. So yes, that's a mild detour from your question about the Russian money. I think the answer is quite simple. Some of that Russian money has been returned to Russia. And that has been, I think, long-term goal of President Putin to give amnesties. I think there have been a couple of amnesties, but then there's also, I think, the major bulk of it has permanently decided to anchor itself in West, mostly in Britain, Switzerland, and somewhat in US. And that bulk of money will never connect or never return to Russia. So I think, I don't have from the top of my head exact number of billions or even trillions that have been removed or moved out of Russia thanks to it, thanks to the theft of privatization. But I think still definitely more than 50 or 60% of that money is staying in West and one way or another fueling respective economies, be it in consumption. It's most, it's as again a Spanish gold story. I don't hear that a lot of that money has been invested in brand new technologies and development of forefront industries. It's actually more spent, either in private consumption or in financial instruments.
Right. And
that's my overview. I'm not an expert, an academic on or even definitely not an academic researching on stolen privatization funds and their destinies in Western countries.
Right. I think maybe we can return to this topic after some 10 years or so.
All right.
I um, I also wanted to ask, what would be a couple of books that are close to your heart that have helped you to develop to achieve where you are right now?
I mean, I'm probably in that age that I don't remember all the books I've read, but if you ask me what I have right now on the bookshelf, I have spy literature. I've only watched 2 or 3 times. There's one single movie that I've watched probably 3 times, and it's called Bridge of Spies with Tom Hanks. And I'm reading a book or memoir of a particular spy who is well known that he was the hitman who killed Leo Trotsky. So his name is Pavel Sudoplatov. So I'm reading his memoirs right now. One funny thing is that in his early career as a hitman and as a officer of Secret Service, he was planning a lot of operations against independent Ukrainian immigrants. So I just thought, oh, history is again repeating itself.
Right. You're a head of large auditing company. Uh, is that what you regard as your main achievement in your career, and what has helped you to reach it?
I'm somewhat proud that as a lawyer, I've been able to develop an audit practice in last 3 years. I would say there was a certain shift in my career in 2015 when a law firm that was owned by me was entitled the full license, a full BDO license. So full, and it's more precisely, it's called voting membership. So before that, I was a non-voting member, but since 2015, I became a voting member of BDO network. And the challenge then was, and you can imagine being a fellow lawyer, that even with my Deloitte and Pricewaterhouse background, my understanding of audit is somewhat unprofessional. I've never done an audit in my whole life. So I've written tons or hundreds of agreements and thousands of powers of attorneys, but I've never done an audit. I hardly understand, or I more or less I understand primitively financial statements, and then on the top of that I have more than 10 years of Big Four experience and participating in all sorts of cross-selling activities. But since my young days, I've been definitely a preacher of multidisciplinary approach, even in 90s, but more so in the 21st century. I believe that I've told you, I think before, that law to me seems somewhat boring. I think it's just it's too narrow, and what the business men or business in general want, they want a solution to a broader issue. Certainly, they are not really interested in listening to some dull lawyer explaining why something cannot be done and what are the risks in the world. So certainly you have to be proactive, you have to look for a solution and not only a legal solution. So this is ideal place for myself to be in the middle of carriage that is pulled at least by 3 or even 4 horses. I believe, and I've never enjoyed the beauty of, and I'm really happy and thoroughly enjoying the beauty of audit horse, and discipline and service line, and also the beauty of outsourced accounting. Because in the business terminology, if you are a lawyer, you are very much limited and to short-term projects and very fluctuating cash flows. Your projects, excluding occasionally larger litigations and bigger M&A projects, they are not longer than a couple of months. Audits, they are seasonal, though there is a slowdown in summer, but they are very stable. Once you have created a pool of or book of business, portfolio of business, mostly it stays the same 90%. The retention is very high, and once you move forward and you do right things in audit, it's a very stable business. That can be a backbone of any consulting business, because with the fluctuating cash flows, you never know when to invest in people, how to hire them, when to invest in technologies, whether you will be able to pay salaries on and banks are not very keen to overdraft law firms. So just by having even a third horse, which is even more stable than audit, which is outsourced accounting, it's fun as a business person to see how you can balance different mindsets, because the mindsets of these people working in these professions are different, totally different from my mindset. But I've learned to deal with them. I don't know whether I'm perfect, but I've learned to deal with them. Just as an example, the pride of auditor is being so so critical, so digging so deep, because that's their professionalism. As a lawyer, I would say he's inflicting pain and harming my client. He's just humiliating my client. But in audit, that humiliation is called professionalism. And with a smile, report to the client, look, I just looked into the files and I found that, and that many shit. And I congratulate you, my dear client, that you have these issues now on hand. And the client should go, oh, thank you, dear auditor. You've done an exceptionally good job finding all these things. Let's now think how to resolve them. If auditor does the work and there's no finding, and client just, okay, whatever my bookkeeper did was fine, then this is not an audit.
Right. And you are also, I see you as a leader of large company. Do you have some leadership principles you normally try to stick to?
Definitely, I probably have instincts how I run myself and behave myself. I'm not in great expert to articulate that in sort of great many shallow words. Well, I certainly try to lead by example. I certainly am focused on business, and I'm easygoing and help people that are equally business minded. I have my special way of communication. I might seem to be very soft and easygoing, but sometimes I'm not. So I'm probably a great preacher of art of compromise. I'm not shouting, that's not my style. And always explain that we are in the business of helping clients resolve their problems and let our people, experience, grow, reach new horizons. And I'm definitely not only the multidisciplinary preacher, but as a hunter, I believe in hunting in a pack. The difference why lionesses can hunt bigger animal in Africa compared to cheetah or leopard is that they hunt in a pack, and the buffalo can be killed only by a number of hungry lionesses. And those who do not know why the male lions are not hunting, the answer is very simple. They are the territory protectors. They are the states. They give the jurisdiction to the lionesses to hunt. And they hunt at nighttime, protecting other intruders from the territory. So that their mission is somewhat higher. And they have the split of functions. So, and that's why, that white lionesses have hunted the buffalo. The first one to have the meal is the lion, because he's fought hard over the night with his competitors, defended the pack, and therefore he deserves the juiciest part of the buffalo. So we hunt in a pack. So this is my way, my leadership. I explain it in a nutshell.
Great example. As our podcast is called Tax Stories, is there a story that comes to your mind from your, I don't know, from your practice that is related to taxation?
Yeah, we probably already named and explained that I started with offshore. I've done probably a great deal of offshore trust-related work. I can probably, I don't want to be sounding that old that I'm only recollecting the things that I did 30 years ago. I can just tell what I was doing a week ago in UAE. That might be helpful. Because the UAE and Latvia have certain similarities in offering certain tax advantages, and the major tax advantage of UAE, despite every cooperation, exchange rule, and signing up of double tax treaties, UAE has never had direct taxation, be it personal income tax or corporate income tax. And so I was there setting up a family foundation for a widow whose husband died a year ago, and by doing that, I was also having the widow registered for tax residency and for obtaining her residence permit, and this is a way where I believe that the tax advantages, the certain copying of known legislation on family foundations from Europe, from European jurisdictions, and implementing in a free zones. Technically, this is an entity in Abu Dhabi financial zone, so it's called ADGM. That's also a little twist on UAE. There are two jurisdictions: Dubai free zone and ADGM financial zone and ADGM. That are two jurisdictions that apply UK law and have UK judges to review the disputes. So it's a two independent free zones within the federal country of United Arab Emirates. So yeah, that's what that's a type of a project I was personally involved last week.
Right. Just going back a little bit again, I'm dragging you back to the history. I know that you wrote a paper in a daily business newspaper, DN's Business, actually a series of articles about the history, Latvian taxation history before World War II, which is the first time of independence of Latvia from 1918, which is right when Latvia got its independence right after World War I, and it was independent until World War II, which ended unfortunately in 1940. So during those 20 years of independence, do you see some findings from that research that would be useful to know for people who are living nowadays?
I think there's a multiple of aspects. I think there's one particular aspect that why I was keen to do that. I think we have a particular disregard in Latvia for our actual history. We used to refer to that for propagandic reasons, but actually without actually knowing why we are referring to our history. So I thought, let's, for the sake of professionalism, finally find out what are the basics, what are the basic facts of the tax system that existed pre-World War II. Obviously, I think the quick conclusion is that obviously this was time of absence of large unions or international bodies that kind of coordinated anything. There was a League of Nations, but it was quite, I think, useless in many aspects. So certainly there was no alternative to European Union at that time, and you could see that the states were much more free in pursuing and defending their own interests. From modern day Latvia, it's completely amazing to not only have import customs duties but also have export customs duties. Obviously, I see a lot of similarities between the excise regimes. We also looked at the excise. You have to say that there were certain, I would say, major differences in the modern day taxation and in the taxation pre-World War. Namely, that there was, I would say, 99% absent of value-added tax. There was a sales tax, but I found the similarity quite humorous. Is that both coffee, alcohol, and cigarettes were excised both in pre-war Latvia and now. The difference being that the pre-war Latvia also subject to excise or customs levy import of radio transmitters or radios, based on number of so-called bulbs, as for the reason to protect the local producer. That's very simple. You would also find from modern day political sort of standpoint difficult to accept that there were different taxation rules for men and women. Men had to pay higher taxes, especially when they were single, not married, and having no children. That would be probably not very popular with some parts of modern community. Obviously, there was interesting differentiator on real estate. There was a lower real estate tax applied to Latgale, which is southeast of Latvia, always considered less developed and in need of more support. That was resolved in those days by just differentiating the real estate tax, as simple as that. And having, I have to note that the farms below 17 hectares were actually real estate tax exempt. So really the small peasants or small farms got, I think, a particular benefit or exemption or subsidy from the Latvian state. So Latvian state at that time was not shy of organizing monopolies. There were butter monopoly, the ham monopoly. These were the state-run companies that did basically the wholesale purchases from the farmers of the products. Maybe they own some procession factories, and they were the ones who coordinated the export of these products. So the issue of the modern day Latvian agricultural export is probably the lack of size, lack of critical mass in whatever we do. And in those days, it was resolved by establishing these large state-owned exporting companies that could probably meet the demand of and scale of customers in those days. So I believe I knew you would ask, so I reread these publications, and I was surprised they're pretty good.
They really are. And when reading those publications, I thought of actually of tax congress I visited in Seoul in South Korea, when I saw that the city granted a tax exemption to those people who and businesses who moved to the other side of the river in order to develop other side of city. And this reflects to what you said about Latgale region, that to grant some real estate tax benefits there. Do you see some similar radical approach would be possible within the current Latvia, especially in the context of the EU state aid restrictions and so on?
State aid, that's a serious issue to take into account. There are certain rules that you shouldn't violate. And there is a certain dress code and principles implemented by EU. But I would say at this moment, I think EU is not on rise; it's more on decay. So I think the contradictions within the Union, inspired by individualism by certain countries, will more and more produce the discussion that actually the exclusive competence of European Union will be drawn more narrow and narrow. So certainly this is now the time where sovereign states are certainly flexing the muscle in their sort of sole exclusive jurisdictions, and they are very much hungry to take the gray zone. So they will be sort of expanding their jurisdiction exclusivity sort of competence into the gray zone, and they'll be pushing out union. So that's my prediction. And in that sort of age, which I predict will be probably the next 10 years, we will see more and more individualistic sovereign decisions by a number of member states. So I would expect I'm not the one who is predicting an immediate collapse of European Union, but I certainly I'm predicting the easing of centralization drive. So I think whatever it has been achieved will stay and probably will lessen. In that context, I would imagine that there'll be more and more tax initiatives or tax related or similar to tax initiatives that will be simply driven by member states.
Right. And this brings me to a thought that it must be exciting. It must have been exciting for the legislators in the new country back in 1918, more than 100 years ago, to develop tax laws completely from scratch. Then when we regained independence in 1990, after withdrawing from USSR, we were in the same position again. And sometimes I have this feeling that we should do it again to develop our tax laws completely from a blank sheet of paper. And this maybe corresponds to what you just told, that to take the initiative in our hands and do everything right finally.
Yes and no. I think there's a need for historical correction. When it was time in 1918, what the Latvian state founders did, they actually translated and they copied the tax code of Russian Empire. So I think the difference was that the founders of Latvia independence in 1920, they didn't consider Russian Empire as something outdated, incompetent, because remember it was a capitalistic economic system anyway. So for the most of the Latvian laws, commercial laws, civil laws, and especially the tax code, there was no issue to use it because A, it was familiar, B, it was drawn by the best minds of Russian Empire, including maybe Latvians, Germans, whoever participating. So that was the technique they used in 1920. The technique, obviously, that they used in 91 and especially in 40, it was difficult because the Bolshevik Soviet Union was based politically, propagandistically on different foundations, and just copying the tax code of Soviet Union wouldn't help you much. So as I would say, in history, there are very few instances where something is created from scratch. There's always a sample, there's always an object that is copied or used to large extent to be copied. I would rather say, kind of my feeling, what's needed in Latvia is this holistic approach to responsibility, or holistic approach to the task. So if someone says the task is growing of wealth or developing of economy, the first thing we should do is combine these two ridiculous ministries, Ministry of Finance and Ministry of Economics. I mean, I mean, since probably yesterday we had finally the central bank merged with financial commission, or, I don't remember anyone apologizing or explaining why 20 years ago this was a great thing to split them, or 15 years, but there was yesterday a big hooray that they are finally merging again. So I would imagine that the split of economy into the fiscal and development under two separate ministries, and worse so, being responsibility of two different coalition parties, is a contribution to where we stand economically right now. So if I was bold, I would probably combine all these responsibilities in one, be it Ministry of Finance, which is both responsible for not only collecting taxes and dealing with fiscal issues, but also having responsibility for economic development. Plus, and I would even merge with the Ministry of Education, because I see the most direct link between all these three in a small country like ours, and that should be above all run by one minister coming from the one and the same party, not having a gang of 6 political parties represented that have a potential to agree on very, very minimum of issues, because the horse trading is rampant.
Right. And my last question about your article on history of Latvian taxation is that I saw also in that article that there was a quite substantial personal tax exemption for people not to pay tax at all. So do you see also that this is the way to go nowadays in Latvia? I know that in many countries like UK there and in Scandinavia there is a quite big non-taxable amount that in order to sort of tackle the inequality issues. Do you see this as the way to solve these issues, or maybe as Thomas Piketty wrote that we should think about that wealth is growing more than the state budgets, and think about some progressive rates to this wealth growth.
Yeah, this is complicated. You asked, I would say, rather technical and narrow issue, narrow question about one issue, which is taxes exempt income. And you simultaneously mentioned Piketty and touched upon a number of functions of taxation. I certainly believe that there are more than one function in taxation. So one function is obviously to feed the fisc and feed the government, but that's not the only one. The redistribution of wealth and social justice probably is as important as just simply feed the budget. And the element of and level of non-taxable or exempt income per year is a good sign if the country is really aware, or the politicians in the country are aware of some sort of social justice philosophy and thinking. Just to give you, and I remember that amount, I don't know if listeners are the tax history fans, but back in pre-war World War II Latvia, the exempt income from taxation was 2,000 lats per year. And 2,000 lats per year, I'm again judging, guessing, somewhat, bluffing, but I would believe that it's definitely more than 2,000 euros. And I would even say that if we convert the purchase power of 2,000, and it will be interesting, I can promise you, I will do that conversion of 2,000 lats in 1940, but my guess is it's more like 20,000 euros now. So quite a considerable amount of income was exempt. And I believe the politicians at that time understood one simple truth. Do not bother to regulate people who take care of themselves. People who are earning below 2,000, but they take care of themselves, their kids, their families, and they are not bothering the state, with the subsidies and employment subsidies and this and that. Why not to tax and focus the large tax authority resource on something more important and bigger taxpayer than these small individuals that just can take care of themselves. So when I hear this outcry about grey economy, I'm somewhat split. I believe obviously the tax should be paid, but shouldn't we be chasing every waitress and prostitute and everyone who has undeclared income in a range of 2,000 euros? Shouldn't we be spending our resources, our scarce resources, more rational? So coming back to your parallel as to exempt income in nowadays European Union, yes, we are on the lowest positions. I think I heard relatively recently that our coalition is proposing to increase non-taxable minimum and probably even increasing minimum salary. So, what is minimum salary, which is untaxed in Sweden, Finland, or Belgium, which is more than 1,000 euros, which is an average salary in Latvia. We have to understand that our economy and our wealth as a society is relatively poor. We are probably relatively rich compared to 100 countries in the globe, but within the European Union, we are more towards the bottom of the scale.
Yes, and then let's talk about it. How to grow this wealth. Let's imagine you are a new finance minister of Latvia. What would you do in that position? I totally agree with you that we should focus on how to promote and make it much easier for the businesses to grow here in Latvia. But do you have some recipes, some quick fixes that you see?
Unfortunately, I believe the situation or the sickness is very deep and chronicle. So my answer would be a simple minister of finance can do very little unless he or she is supported by the party that forms a coalition at least with only one more party. Because the trick is in Latvia that our institutes of power are very weak. We don't live, as we mentioned, we do not live according to the tax code of 1918, or which was adopted in Russian Empire in 1909. But you know very well that we live according to the constitution that was passed in 1918 or 1920, which was a copy of a Weimar German constitution that was meant to create weak institutions of power. And that Weimar constitution, by the way, allowed Hitler to come to power and Ulmanis to come to power in Latvia. But we still pray and treasure that constitution that is the dinosaur of constitutions in the modern Europe. All other countries have changed their constitutions more than once. And I believe our institutional weakness comes from there and from the law on parties and law on elections. So if ever Latvia will have a fortune that only two parties form coalition, that coalition immediately has to kick off the reform of constitution, election law, and party law, because we are only voting for the list of parties. We are never voting for candidates. You know, even in Lithuania, there's a mix of 50-50. So once that is achieved, which is paramount, you can focus now on doing something good for economy and creating wealth. And I would say that's why I said that Ministry of Finance should be merged with Ministry of Education and Ministry of Economics, because I believe that, you know, the only money, and even lend money, should be used for creation of specialists, of you know, minds and education, creating the background environment where the state invests in education. And obviously the model how it works now, whatever we have, we invest in education and these people run away, and that practice should be stopped. But as well as the Ministry of Finance combined with Ministry of Economy, I would finally decide on strategy. You know, what is Latvian economic strategy? Is it IT, as Estonians have postulated 20 years ago? Is it logistics? Is it forestry in its broadest sense? What is the economic strategy? Because it cannot be everything and nothing same time. And I would be certainly using the instruments of moderate but still effective state aid within the legislation, even for this specific purpose of promoting one or two strategic industries that are strategically important to the whole of Latvia. Be it pharmaceuticals, I don't know, but the lack of the clearness, what is our strategic priority, is obvious. We see that people are still running away from the country. The levels of wealth are growing in Latvia, but comparatively to other countries, we are slow and we are behind.
Yes, I always remember that my discussion with Vils Kristapans when we are playing golf together. Then he said that look at the GDP of Latvia and look at the GDP of Finland, which is like how many times more, and then we talk. Sort of.
Yes, and what is important that the gap is the gap decreasing or increasing, and that's a saddest fact. It is increasing.
Right. And in that context, just going from macroeconomics to your daily business, then what would be sort of your visiting many countries, many companies, many foreign investors? What would be a couple of things you normally still say about Latvia as positive trends, as sort of teasers to get Latvia attractive in their eyes?
That's what I did on Monday, on 13th of September in Dubai. I use the word preaching, but I was, telling or describing or basically describing the project, the legislation and support on startups. I was explaining that Latvia has a unique support legislation to startups, and in my personal both business and business in terms of external clients, my own recruitment has worked ideally or with very positive cases, many positive cases when it comes to Belarusian IT sector. So the startups as such are very friendly to, I would say, because a startup in Latvian definition is a small new company that is involved in technology. It's not really limited to hardware or software. It can be even probably used in crypto, or, the broad. It has to have an innovative element, and once it has, you have, I think, unheard support. Even the highest, in my opinion, is support on taxes on salaries for, I think, for 12 or maximum 24 months. So which is if you are in a high tech area somewhere in the world, and especially outside the European Union, and you are, as in Belarusian case, you are even bordering this country, I think that regime is competitive with the regimes that Poland and Lithuania are marketing heavily on Belarusians. So I would say, obviously, we are not the winners of the prize. We are the bronze medal winners, but I think we are proud bronze medal winners in that competition, that the model that the startup regime in particular offers, but more so the Latvian general tax regime with exempt corporate taxation for retained earnings and relatively moderate, still moderate, but not top taxation of high net wealth individuals. Latvia is still a competitive jurisdiction for moving the owners or highly paid managers of IT and high-tech companies. So what I see in Latvia, I see many more owners of Belarusian IT companies here rather than hundreds of IT engineers or programmers. So, in a way, it's probably more beneficial to move IT millionaires into Latvia than just 100 of Indian or 50 Belarusian programmers. So it's about choice, but I find that the combination of Latvian tax system as it is, plus the startup regime that has been developed and is greatly supported by Latvian Development Agency, which I find, for the change, very positive in Latvia, and I praise them. That this can attract a serious interest to Latvia as a jurisdiction.
Right. I guess with those words, we are approaching towards the end of our time together in this podcast, Jānis. As you probably know, I end up all my podcasts with a question to my guests about their version of meaning of life for them. We already discussed a little bit about this, but what would be your sort of summary?
The question is meaning of life, because I'll be honest, I know you personally, but I'm not really just a subscriber of your AirPods, so casts, whatever they're called. But I might become after this. I just didn't hear what's the meaning of life.
Meaning of life for you, yes.
It's enjoy it. That's the meaning of life. Life is given. It's short. You have to understand the life is all about time or limits of time. And one should appreciate the time that has been granted to you. I mean, that's the trick of it, and quickly get over the lows and depressions and crises, and try to enjoy whatever you do. So be active, do and enjoy it by doing, and do work, pleasure. Be active. Don't stay still and complain. That's the most critical things.
Right. And I have enjoyed really every minute of our discussion, and thank you very much for that. And I congratulate once more you with your birthday, and hope this podcast will be a small gift from me to you in this birthday, that when you sometime later could be listening back to what you were thinking at this time.
Yeah, definitely. I promise I will be more loyal to your podcast from now on. I will be signing up, I promise.
That wasn't my intention, but thank you.
Janis, thank you
for this.
for having me. Ciao, ciao.
Ciao.